There we go. All right. As you guys know, we record these so that we can then share them with those chamber professionals that are unable to join us on Friday, and we'll send that out next week. We had a great call last Friday, lots of great information from Clay, and I'm sure he's got some updates for us. I know the legislature was very busy this week. So, with that, I will turn it over to Clay, Executive Vice President of BCA, to walk us through the week that was. So, Clay, all
Well,
yours.
thank you, Paige, and good morning, everyone. I hope the weather is as good as it is in Montgomery, where you are. About to head north back home here in a little bit. Looking forward to being in North Alabama. So the legislature this past week just did a back to 2 day weeks. They originally were going to do a three day week, and they knocked it back to 2 days. So this completes day 20 and day 21 of the regular legislative session. So there's 9 possible days left. So we're just a few a few weeks away from wrapping this one up. It has been a, a big a big session. They have tackled a lot of big topics and issues. We have had to play a lot of defense for the business community, particularly around insurance. We're going to have to do a better job as a business community of educating legislators that any mandates that they place on insurance are certainly passed on to businesses. I heard a interesting statistic this week that businesses or private individuals make up about 52% of Alabama's insurance policyholders, or who pays those premiums. And so, whenever they put a mandate, they can't mandate. Well, they can mandate Medicaid, but they don't because it's increased cost to them. But they certainly cannot mandate anything to Medicare. So when you're talking about these mandates, um, the business community picks up the bulk of the cost for everyone. Um, and so that's something that we're going to be working on to educating legislators that whenever they do anything like that, like the PBM or the ambulance bill that I'm going to talk about later on, it means that business or individuals wind up picking up the bill. So our workforce package, we had a good week with the workforce package. About half of those bills have passed the Senate. The Workforce Transformation Act passed the Senate. The Career Pathways Act passed the Senate, and the Growth Alliance passed the Senate. The innovation bills have not passed the Senate yet. There's about the seventh substitute that has been compiled. It has been sent home with a few of the senators that had issues with it, incorporating their changes. They're going to look over those changes over the weekend, and hopefully that will alleviate some of their concerns, and those two bills will pass out of the Senate. As you remember, those are the enabling legislation for the setting up the innovation districts, as well as the constitutional amendment that will allow those innovation districts. The child care tax credit, which is something we're extremely interested in and is part of the package, had a good public hearing in House Ways and Means Education. We it and the housing tax credit were all discussed um, in the House ETF committee. We expect those to come out next week, particularly the child care tax credit, and then hopefully be ready for a floor vote in the House, then to be passed up to the Senate after that. The House Education Ways and Means Committee also um, discussed the $9.3 billion Record Education Trust Fund. That's a tremendous amount of money. I think when I first started in 2010 for the 2011 session, I want to say that budget was around 7 billion, somewhere in there. So it has increased exponentially. And then the Senate passed the general fund budget. So another record budget there. The general fund budget, which is everything non-educational. So that is Medicaid, Aaliyah, you name it, anything non-educational is in the general fund. That budget is at 3.4 billion, and again, I think back when I started, it was around 1.7 to 1.8 billion dollars. So, tremendous amount of growth in those two budgets. Some of that obviously is through increased economic activity, increased spending by consumers, increased wages, and those are certainly reflected in those budgets. There's also, I think, important to note that changing budgeting practices have led to those. One of the first bills that I voted on was the Rolling Reserve Budget Act that changed the way that we budget. In Alabama, first it applied to the Education Trust Fund, and then it worked so well that we passed another bill to make it apply to the general fund. And essentially, what that budget does, or that budgeting practice does, is in the past they would basically guess what revenues were going to be in the future. We certainly don't operate like that in our businesses, and state government should not operate the same way. So instead of just picking a number out of space based off projections, or in the past, whatever Paul Hubbard said the number was going to be with AEA, because AEA did used to write the education budgets. That actually happened. Um, but it takes an average over the past 15 years and then drops off any years that are extreme. For instance, the past several years, because of the amount of federal dollars that have come into the state, around 64 billion due to COVID and the stimulus and the like. Um, those outlier years are taken out. So you get a good average of what revenues have been, and then you budget based off that number. It sets a cap, a spending cap. They cannot spend all of the increase. A good bit of the increase has to go to a reserve fund. So the premise is, in the good years, you capture you capture revenue that you can save, and in the bad years, it props it up. So it actually forces you in the legislature to have gains every year, even in down economies. So that and that's we're one of the few states that does that, and that is a huge deal and a huge benefit for the people of Alabama moving forward. So the budgeting process, obviously, the general fund has moved to the House, so it will go through the House, and we expect the education budget to move out of the House probably next week. Um, the bill that I was referencing earlier that we are extremely opposed to, we spoke in public hearings in both the Senate and the House. There are two companion bills. It will mandate a 320, or excuse me, a huge increase in what insurance companies are required to reimburse ambulance services. It would tie it to 325% above the Medicare rate. it's a considerable amount of money. They estimate that it would be about a $65 million hit to the business community. As y'all know, they probably think, well, the insurance companies will absorb those costs. We all know that that does not happen; they get passed on. So we very much oppose those bills. We certainly understand that in a lot of our rural areas, there is lack of adequate ambulance coverage, and again, we fully support increased healthcare options because that's certainly an economic development inhibitor or helper. But we absolutely are not in support of this entirety being passed on to the business community, especially when the bill mandates this, but it doesn't guarantee that there will be increased coverage anywhere. So obviously, if we're asked to flip the bill, we need to know that it's going to have an impact in increased ambulance coverage or whatever coverage could be out there. And again, that 325% increase would not be bore by Medicaid. It would not be bore uh, by uh, by Medicare. It would be entirely bore by that 52% that would be asked to pay for all. And we simply do not agree with that and are opposing it. Those two bills did not come out of committee. They did not receive a vote. They were public hearings, and we're hopeful that we're more than willing to be at the table to help solve this problem. But this simply is not the way to do it. So, with that, I'd love to open it up for any questions that y'all might have.
Clay, I'm sorry if I missed it. What were the numbers on the ambulance service bill?
Oh, good question. Good question. We can get those out to you. Let me see if I can find those real quick. Uh, and Caroline's on the phone, on the call. She making. Let's see. Oh, there we go. SB 313 is the Senate bill, and then HB. Hold on, she's texting. Let's see. Find them in my list. And then we have HB 401. So SB 313 and HB 401. Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Clay.
You're
All right,
welcome.
does anybody have questions for Clay?
Clay, I've had a couple members reach out to us about the occupational licensing bill. We've been following that bill along. Do you have any update on that as far as does it look like it's going to get any more movement by the end of the session or anything?
We're not sure yet. There's been a lot of work done on that. It has been whittled down a tremendous amount. It's we don't want to say that it. I mean, it certainly has legs. Where Senator Elliott is definitely a very capable legislator, but I think it's got a long way to go. Unless there's been a lot of headway made on it at the end of this week. Um, I'm I'm not sure it's if it does move, it's going to be whittled down a lot, and it would probably have more difficulty in the House than it would the Senate.
And by whittled down, you mean like whittled down in the number of professions involved with the
Uh,
bill?
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Clay, I can follow up with you guys. I had sent over to the team a day or two ago Senate Bill 254 by Senator Jones. It's around ATV parks
Yeah,
and some new mandates.
that's probably dead as a hammer.
Okay. I've had 3 chambers reach out to me because of the impact. They have huge tourism assets. So,
Yeah, that bill that bill is extremely problematic. I um, I won't go into the story about it in respect to the sponsor, but it, knowing the bill wasn't going anywhere. I think a local bill has been filed that's still probably won't go anywhere.
okay.
But yeah, I highly doubt it would be signed out in the House.
Okay.
I'll send you, because I know you're interested in it, a little more information on it.
Okay.
But yeah.
I just want to be able to circle back with a couple of them that are pretty concerned about it.
Yeah. That one's that actually came to a head yesterday.
Okay.
So it's still very new. Yeah.
I
Not.
appreciate that.
You're welcome. I'll text that over to you right now.
Okay. Sounds good. Anybody else while we have Clay?
Clay, also the SB 293, the Lawsuit Fairness Act with our friends at Trucking. Do we have any update on that as we approach the end?
Yeah, so I actually just left. We have a group down here called ACJRC, Alabama Civil Justice Reform Committee. We actually voted as a group to support that bill. I Obviously BCA is extremely supportive of tort reform in a big way. Matter of fact, in my previous life, I worked on a lot of tort reforms and really became very discouraged because the trial lawyers are deeply entrenched across the street, and um, we as a business community really need to unite around this issue. Um, you, if you don't think there's a problem in this state, and this is something I'm very passionate about, and this is something I think that y'all will hear a lot more of in the future. If you don't think that there's a problem in this state, and that businesses probably one of our number one problems in this state, then you don't drive and you don't see the amount of billboards that are out there with a trial lawyer telling people to call them. There is a market here. Um, there are massive, look, we're to the point in this state that insurance companies are just settling. They're just settling because, and some counties are worse than others. They're settling because they're scared that if it goes to court, an actual trial, it's going to be even worse. I personally don't think that we can call ourselves a pro-business state unless we tackle tort reform. With that being said, I'm not sure that there's enough time this session to get this bill through. I also don't think that every business group has what they would like to see in this bill. I think that there's more work to do. We're obviously supportive of the bill. What we don't want to happen is for a tort reform bill to be watered down and passed, and then the legislature say, hey, we dealt with that. We dealt with tort reform. We don't want to see any more tort reform for the next 4 or 5 years. That would be bad. So I think that I think that there's a lot more work to do on this. I think it's an extremely important topic for the business community. I think that we need to be very engaged in the discussions and the development of these bills. Uh, Hats off to Mark Colson and the truckers. They have done a tremendous job. They have spent around 20 hours in discussions with the trial lawyers. I myself have uh, sat in negotiations with the trial lawyers, and as y'all can imagine, they're very good negotiators. I think this is one to where that can really rally the business community, bring everyone together, and for a common cause. But with 9 days left, I think that's very challenging. One of the things they do that they are very good at is dragging you out, and they will constantly say, "Well, show us examples. Give us examples. I mean, show us where the problem is." Well, a lot of times you can't because it doesn't go to trial; it goes to settlement. Um, so their tactics are good, and I just think if they're sitting there with four attorneys, we need to sit there with 8 attorneys, and that's it's not as organized as it should be. I think the public should understand that there is a direct cost to this jackpot justice that Alabama finds itself in. Those costs, those increased insurance premiums that are a direct result of all these settlements, all these lawsuits, leads to a direct increase of cost of goods sold and transportation and logistics. We in the business community, we simply seek fairness. We want justice. And right now in this state, when it comes to these lawsuits and these settlements, it is not justice. Let's be very clear about that. They have an edge, and I have sat over there and watched them get an edge on the business community and get their claws in and fund Republicans and Democrats. And I think it's time that we push back on that as a business community because it is crushing us. Some sectors and industries more than others, but it is certainly a major problem, and I just really think we need to address it. So, Sam, thanks for your interest in that, paying attention to it. I hate to say that I'm not sure there's enough time, but that's just the reality I think we're in right now. But I do think that if it doesn't go through or it gets watered down so much that we actually need to stop it, which I think I don't think I think everyone else, the other associations, are in agreement that we don't want it to be watered down so much that it really we can't come back and take another bite at the apple. But I do think that it's something that we're still going to be engaged with over the coming year, and that y'all hear a lot more about, and frankly, the public needs to hear a lot more about.
And Clay, if I might add anecdotally from our community up in the Shoals, we signed on to the letter from trucking and in agreement with the bill, and have faced some pushback from trial lawyers who locally, of course, are going to be members of a community organization like the chamber. And I'm sure every chamber in the state has 1 or 2 trial lawyers on your board. So I think a great thing for us would be to, if this is not going to pass this section, leading into next session, prepare some talking points for these chambers that we could have be able to combat that misinformation about, we're not putting $1 million cap on damages. It's on non-economic damages. It doesn't have to do with your medical bills and all of that. This is a completely separate thing. And talking about the need for the fairness in the financial disclosures in the truth in advertising. I think that's something that a lot of these chambers as local grassroots business organizations can do, and it come across differently than some of our specific organizations like trucking or like certain business groups. So
Yeah, no question. Y'all will play a major role in this moving forward, and I promise you, we will arm you with everything that you need to know, and everything that your members need to know. You know, um, we would have, you know, not quite a year, but you know, because you know, about 9 months with you know, we're discussing, you know, research and facts and numbers and conducting studies to prove we have a problem. We're not quite Georgia yet. Georgia is the worst. Georgia is um, the worst state, and Governor Kemp actually proposed a tort reform um, a tort reform package, and then he backed off. The trial lawyers are very entrenched in Georgia, and they're very entrenched here, but they're especially are in Georgia. You've seen Florida pass a tort package, but y'all will absolutely play a major role in this to help us educate the public on what 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 this costs them, and it costs every Alabamian a tremendous amount of money because the system. I mean, to put it down where the ghost gives it ain't justice. I can promise
Clay, I have a question that is related perhaps. There are a lot of states that will, you could be disbarred for doing the kind of advertising that our lawyers do in this state. Um, could the problem be, I mean, because it won't just affect the trucking companies. Well, could the problem be addressed by addressing that and making some changes there?
you. Yes, ma'am. Part of the bill is the truth in advertising component. That you know, you see this. We got so and so $5 million for this claim. Yeah, well, how much did you take of that? How much did the law firm take of that? So absolutely, that you know what we're talking about is an omnibus bill that has everything in it. This bill doesn't, I don't think, has everything from the business community's wish list, but it has a lot of it. The other part of it, y'all, that you need to know about and start talking about it is um, third party financing. A lot of people don't realize this is going on. This blew my mind. Third party financing is hedge funds and venture capital are in actually investing in lawsuits like class action lawsuits that are going to have huge settlements. Foreign countries, including China and Brazil, are investing in third party in lawsuits. Now, what that means is they essentially fund the lawsuit. All right, they fund all the expert witnesses, everything. These things can be millions of dollars. So the, the private equity groups, they'll fund these for the profits. There's an instance that Brazil, through an end around group, everybody knows Brazil is a big agricultural economy. Um, they sued certain American packers, meat packers. So foreign countries are using this to actually inflict economic damage on American companies. So this bill seeks, part of this bill seeks to have some transparency in that the jury and the judge has to be notified that who's funding um, who's funding this lawsuit. So um, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on with this that the business community needs to pay attention is actively happening. That we need to stop, and that we want to be fair. We don't want to tilt it, and protect bad actors. That's not at all what we're after, and that's what the trial lawyers like to throw back at you. Oh, y'all are just protecting bad actors. Not at all. Matter of fact, the bad actors aren't members of our organizations. We don't want to protect the bad actors. So, yeah, it's a complicated issue, and I agree. The advertising is a big problem.
I've included in the chat the website for anyone who's not had an opportunity to see the current bill. Crystal, did you have a question? I saw you went off mute.
Well, I was just kind of shocking to hear what Clay just said about that, especially that part of it. So, I guess it's not disclosed who's funding, nor is it asked. I guess there's no provision.
They don't have to disclose right now.
Yeah.
This bill would force them to disclose that in discovery. Yeah, it's shady. I mean, this aspect, this growing, and it's a growing sector of these. So it's just, as you can imagine, it's just spurring on more and more and more. And again, all those billboards, all those, these third party financing, it's happening because there's a market there, and they know there's a market there. And so, until we start removing, that market, we're not really doing anything. I think we can't really claim that we are a pro business state unless we focus on tort reform, real tort reform, comprehensive tort reform.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Clay. Anybody else have anything else for the group? All right. Clay, as always, thank you. Thank you for being so open and explaining what's going on in such a way that it really does hit home for our chambers and our members. So with that, we will not meet again next Friday, but we will meet April the 26th, which is, of course, the Friday following Executive Leadership Conference up in the Shoals. So we know everybody will be getting home and back to the office, but I hope that you'll take an opportunity to join us, because I have a feeling over the next 2 weeks, as we get closer and closer to Sine Die, things are just going to keep moving. And as always, if something comes up in the interim that we need quick action on, the BCA team is great to reach out to us, and we'll let you guys know. But with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thank you again for being engaged. Thank you for being informed, and for all that you do for your communities. And Clay, appreciate you, and safe travels back to North Alabama.
Thank you. Good to be
All right,
with
y'all have a good weekend.
too.